You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
Hey friends, thanks for clicking in. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about financial management. Basically, we're just going to be talking about our points of view and what we could do to better structure your money. I'm here with Siju Koshi. My name's Sajan Abraham. Again, thank you so much for clicking and joining us. I would say arguably financial management is one of the cornerstones of really any kind of business, especially with real estate. And I think a good starting point is getting a good grasp of your personal finances. And so that's basically what we're going to be going over. But before we get started, Siju, how's life? How's everything going?
Going good, Saj. Wrapping up the end of the year. Just busy with work, a little bit of grind here and there, but in the holidays. So kind of excited about that for the kids and everybody else, How about you? You doing all right?
Yeah, things are good. Same thing, just trying to wrapping up the year and stuff. Like, luckily, with the end of the year, it gets kind of slow at work. We're wrapping up our latest purchase for rental property. We're wrapping all that stuff up, and we got a tenant. As of yesterday, we got a tenant in there, so that's good. They're moving in next year. I mean, the beginning of next year, but it's just a peace of mind knowing that like you made it to the finish line, and now we got someone in there. So I can't complain. Good.
That's a good feeling, especially when you've kind of closed it. You have somebody in there. I know that feeling. So, dude, I'm happy for you, man. That's good. Awesome, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks. All right. Well, cool, man. Like, without further ado, let's just dive into it, right? Like,
let's do it.
Speaking, financial management and really more so about personal finances. And I think that kind of bleeds into business finance. If you have your home put together well, it's easier to translate into business. So, what kind of tips and things are you doing to save money? Like, what do you got going on?
On my side, number one, if you're trying to get into this kind of venture, what the podcast is about, right? It's investments, getting into real estate. Obviously, you're going to need some money, right? But I mean, I think the main point to do is or to take away is grab a hold of your finances, right? Understand what is coming in, what is going out, right? Like, how much are you spending versus how much are you, making, right? I mean, if you're making $100 and you're spending $200, there's obviously a problem there, right? And so that's oftentimes where, I mean, it's I hate to say it, it's kind of it should be known and said, right? Or a lot of people should know that, but a lot of people don't realize that, right? And so that's usually the biggest step when you're talking about saving your money.
Right. And I think also just to interrupt a little bit, but I think it's something kind of overlooked. Like, no one really teaches it. No one really talks about it. So for some reason, finances are something that people just don't want to. Like, you just do you, and as long as you're living within your means, I guess, and who really knows what that means, right? So it's kind of good to have these conversations.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, growing up, I mean, I hate to say it, like the Indian culture, but I mean, our parents never told us like what they were spending on, and I don't think it was they had to, educating on how to manage your money. I mean, grown people have these issues, right? I mean, people that are in their 50s, 40s, and then you see all these NFL players, people that are professional athletes that can't manage money either, because obviously it's because of lack of knowledge, right? Or knowing how to start tracking or start somewhere for that,
Right. Sure.
And I think oftentimes it's more, we buy things that we don't even need, and I'm still figuring this out myself. There's things that I go through and I look and I want it. And, I give myself a rule of thumb. I say, if I still want it after 6 months, if it's a big purchase, then I'll pull the trigger on it. If I can find every reason to find out why I can buy this thing, I'll and those are kind of good rules to live by, I think, and that's part of saving money, right? If it's $1,000, I don't know, let's just say a phone, right? Do you really need it, or can you make it with the existing stuff that you have today?
Yeah. No, you're like you said, like, no one's really immune to this. Like, we're sitting here talking about it, like, we're guilty of a lot of things ourselves, right? We might be mismanaging our money in some regards, but like, we're just trying to give some type of structure to have just to start a conversation and like plant a seed in our minds and be diligent about things. It's kind of like with anything else, right? You have to like set a plan and kind of keep at it, and like, if you drop a little bit, it's okay. Just pick yourself back up and keep going,
Most definitely. And then once you understand that, I mean, I think part of that is setting the budget, right? Once you set your budget, the whole thing is make sure you abide by it, right? Like, make sure you don't steer away from it. There's going to be months where you have things that happen, obviously. I mean, and then you actually plan for that too. Actually, you actually budget for some of that stuff. And I think the one thing a lot of people don't understand is that they think that, hey, maybe if I made $10,000 more, this problem will go away. Or maybe if I made $20,000 more, it really won't go away. Really, what I've come to find out is that the more money you make, the more of an issue it's going to be. The more of debt you're gonna go into. Like, I mean, if you have those same buying habits and things like that, you're gonna be stuck in a never-ending cycle.
Right. I mean, like, because it really is human nature. Like, you earn more, so you feel like you deserve more, and then you go buy more, and then you're just in the hole again. Like, it's just kind of until you grab a hold of it, you'll just be stuck in that cycle.
You can even treat yourself once in a while, things like that. But again, it's structured, right? So, managing the money, finding out what you need. And then I think the biggest thing to understand through all this process would be understanding what is good and bad debt, right? There's, obviously this country lives on debt. Plastic, fantastic. Put everything on a credit card, whatever, and it's debt, right? But I mean, there's good debt and bad debt, and I think that's what this has kind of taught me, real estate wise. Investing in real estate, it's going to be a debt. You're taking unending amounts of debt, right? But a house is something that's at least making you money. If you're making X amount of profit on top of the rent, it's at least there's some kind of income that you're actually making off the house. So that in my head is a good debt, right? Or even if you buy a house, versus renting in some cases, depending, right? You may want to rent versus buy, but in most cases, I would say buying a piece of property is good debt.
I would agree, definitely.
Credit card debt, bad debt. Like if a credit card is charging you 30% interest on whatever you're buying, and you're not paying it back, you're obviously not spending your money properly, right? I mean, we talk about getting hit on taxes and everything else. The last thing you need is a credit card to hit you for 30% too.
Right. And I think what the scary part of that is, like, sometimes it's like you just don't know, right? Like, you're spending the money, you feel like you need it, and you justify it where you justify it. And if you don't pay it off in time, you're just paying extra money to the credit card company, and you probably just think like, all right, well, I'm just going to pay it off. And at the end of the day, you for something that costs $100, you ended up paying $500 for it because of all the interest and stuff. So it's kind of like it's dangerous when you don't really like focus and look in on that stuff, right?
For sure. And another one that actually goes along with that, I think, in my head, is car debt. A lot of people buy the latest and greatest. I mean, it's great if you can afford it and treat yourself for those nice things. In my head, the way I work is, if I had the supplemental income to afford me a Lexus or a high-end car, then for sure, but the thing is, a lot of people have to understand, and you hear this all the time, you drive it off the lot and it loses like 20% of its value,
Right.
And so car debt is bad debt in my eyes. If you can't pay for it literally in 3 years, then you can't afford it, right?
Right.
And that's just a rule I live by too. You can buy a car and they can finance it for you for 5 years.
Right.
And so 5 years at like 6% interest, you can get you'll be spending so much money on top of what you spent on that expensive car, right? So the rule that I kind of go by is if you can't pay it off in 3 years, you can't afford it.
Yeah, no, it's a good rule of thumb, I think. Like, just to be able to set parameters on yourself, really, right? I mean, like, everyone, you could justify things by saying, I just like nice things. Like, we all like nice things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, is it wise to go that route, right? I mean, like, that's really what we're asking ourselves.
That all goes with living within your means, right? Paying off those credit cards as fast as you can. If you credit cards, definitely, there's a lot of benefits to using them, right? Points,
Sure.
There's all these things, right? Use them, but pay them off every month. Use them, pay them off, and then that's the biggest thing I kind of take away, because we don't want to be hit with those crazy interest rates, and then whatever you can't afford, pay in cash, or like afford to pay on plastic. I'm saying live by a rule of thumb of if using cash if you can. I mean, that kind of makes you whole too, right? Because you're spending what you actually have, right?
Right. It's not your future money. It's like my right now money. And it kind of makes it what's tangible, and you see it in your hands and you see it physically leaving your person. Like, oh, wow, like this is costing me that $100 or whatever is actually a lot of money, right? When you actually see it. Plastic is kind of, you don't know really. Like, you just, oh yeah, just swipe it, whatever, and like it's a done deal. But like, it gets dangerous quick, if you don't really grab a hold of it.
It hurts more when I'm giving that Benjamin actually to you. But yeah, man. So like on that, I mean, a lot of it is just living within the means, and then you got to have that structure, right? And I know you had a lot of that, and then we always talk about these kind of things. But any tips you can give as far as like actually giving structure or kind of getting like a full grasp of your finances?
Yeah. So like with anything, if you do a Google search, you'll find million ways of how to save money and how to do this. So what I'm saying is just what I do. And so if it works for you, that's awesome. Like run with it. If it doesn't, tweak it or, research something else. But the biggest thing is have a plan. I think the best thing that you can do is have a plan for yourself and just continue to go on with that plan. And if you need to pivot. But as long as you have a starting point, it's always a benefit. So what I do is I open up like 4 accounts at a bank, right? And there's a master account, a tithe account, a long-term savings, and a short-term savings. And so let me break that down. The master account, all of our money gets dumped into the master account. So like our direct deposits for our paychecks and whatever money that we make goes into that master account. And I should say, before it even touches a master account, there's a 401k that we kind of feed before it even touches us. So that's kind of a 5th account, but that's just what it is, right? That's like for future self, right? So now we go to master account, and then on a designated day, I schedule that master account to pay the tithe, long-term and short-term savings. And so that's why it's just dummy proof. I like to build systems around my life. And so with my finances, like the less I'm touching and moving things around physically, the more likely it'll just happen. And I'm, essentially paying myself first before I pay my bills. And so let me break it down even further. The tithe account is basically charitable giving, give to the church or, whatever you feel is right. Long-term savings is dedicated money for big purchases. Big purchases meaning an investment property, a house for yourself, something big that's going to take some money to really, have. So you want to be able to save up for that. And so when that money's just automatically going in, it's like out of sight, out of mind, and you'll build up that cash. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to see like, oh, after this much time, I was able to save up this much money.
I should buy a Porsche.
Or not, don't buy a Porsche. The short-term savings is really for surprises. Like if your Porsche breaks down and you got to repair it, you don't want to go into debt to pay for that, right? Like you want to be able to have cash on hand to say, all right, $500 to fix this. Okay, let me just pay for it. Or if like there's Christmas is coming around the corner, right? You want to buy gifts. You want to save up for that. Like why go into debt for those kind of things? And like that's kind of a form, for me at least, it's a form of budgeting to where I could say, I have this much money in my short-term savings. This is what I can allocate to gifts or for vacations or whatever it might be, right? When there's money sitting in your pocket, you'll probably spend it. And so I use the master account as my pocket, right? I'm paying my bills out of the master account. I'm, just doing paying off the credit card bills, the utilities, the mortgage, all that stuff is coming out of the master account. So that's really kind of like, that's what I'm supposed to be spending. But the fact that that account is paying for the other 3 accounts, tithe, long-term and short-term savings, it kind of makes me feel like I'm paying myself first. So I know that there's money for me and my family for our future selves. So it's kind of like this, like living more of an abundance of like, oh man, I'm important. So I'm going to pay myself first. And so these systems really help me out a lot just because like over time, you when you don't think about it, you kind of look a few months later, a few years later, like, oh, there's a sizable amount of money in our long-term savings. Let's go buy an investment property, or let's go do whatever, move to another house or whatever it is. Like you have that money earmarked for yourself, right?
Do you ever catch yourself shifting money from short to long term or vice versa if you build up on short term or things like that?
Yeah. There's some parameters that I set on these accounts to say like if there's this much money on the account, because there's also this feeling of like if you have too much money sitting in a checking account or savings account that's earning you nothing, like it might be smart to shift it to a higher yielding interest. That's why I buy rental properties, right? Like I can make more money on that money sitting into a house rather than sitting in a savings account. So there is some shifting, and also like life happens too, right? Like, oh, a car broke down. There wasn't enough money in the short term, but there's money in the long term. Just shift it, But again, just rough parameters so you can have a gauge of like, all right, this is where my money's going. This is where it's supposed to be allocated for. But pivot when you need to pivot because there's no hard and fast rule of any of this stuff really. Like it's really based off of life and life happens. So you have to, pivot when you need to pivot and do what you have to do. Another thing about this whole process is automating the whole system, right?
Yep.
To me, it's super important to have it automated because if it's up to me, I might forget on the 3rd to shift that money over and then I'll just forget for that whole month and then it never happened, right? Luckily at my bank, they have programs set in place where you could just say, on this date, schedule that money to go to that account. So that way it's done and there's nothing to think about, So that was really, and this is actually a friend told me about this years ago. He didn't tell me about this specific model, but it was like a rough idea and I kind of tweaked it to my liking. And this is like in college. And so it was just like a offhanded comment like, oh, hey, this is how I do my money. I'm like, oh, wow, what a good way. And it's really helped me build something to where I'm able to save and allocate money for certain things. and shift it off where you need to. So, of course, the earlier you start, the better, but like, it's never too late. You know what I mean? Like, it's never too late to like start saving.
No, and that's a big point, right? You got to start somewhere, right? I mean, if it doesn't matter if it's now or later, but same thing. I've been doing this structure for probably since college, for sure, and
Right.
it's been I didn't break it down by long term or short term, but I actually have started doing that now because it kind of helps a little bit for the everyday things. You allocate your savings how you
Yeah.
want, right? But you definitely need those buckets, I think, because otherwise you just have no control of spending.
Right. Like I said before, like if it's just sitting in your pocket, if $100 is sitting in my pocket, it's probably going to get burned quick,
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
about like, oh, I should save a little bit. Like, but and these are free accounts. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to, and I could open up a checking account for free. I could open a saving account for free. So why not use that to our advantage? And like say it helps me better organize it in my mind. Like it physically moves from that account to this account. I think it's important for us to really take advantage of what's out there. But to take advantage of things, you really have to do the research and just do a little bit of work on the front end, and you'll see the benefits of it as time progresses. So before we wrap anything up, is there anything else that you wanted to add to this whole realm?
No, I think we've kind of beat this horse down a little bit, but I mean, it's really about structure. And I think you kind of touched on it. And I was going to mention this before we wrapped it up is savings first, right? It allows, if you save first, it allows you to work off of what you have left. Right.
Right.
And I think a lot of people go and spend first, right? They pay for their bills, they pay for their house, car, all that stuff. That's all good and great, right? But if you structure your mindset to save first, right? Put the 10% aside for your savings, put the 10%
Right.
for short term, long term, however you decide to allocate it.
Right.
Figure out what works for you first, with what you can live by, and then of
Yeah.
course, then pay the house and everything else. But if you save first, and then it kind of forces you to live within your means of
Yeah.
what you have left, right?
Totally
Um,
agree.
and if you don't have the money to save, then you don't have any money to invest. I hate to say it, but
That's really down to, right? I mean, like
yeah,
you can't, and like kind of like what we kicked off with, if you can't get a grasp of your personal finances, it's going to be that much harder when you start going into a business and you have to have money on hand to be able to make purchases and do repairs or whatever it is,
yep.
and so good start. Like you dive into your personal finances first and get a good hold of that, build systems around your life. It just puts you in a better position to succeed.
Run your household like a business, and that way it preps you for what you're about to do as far as real estate, whatever it does, even if it's not real estate.
Sure.
If it's opening up a pie shop, I mean, it's if you understand the finances and how to allocate and budget and prepare for a rainy day, sunny day, whatever day, a vacation day, it's like you have to. Like, I mean, you literally
Yeah.
have to. And I think start with your household, and then the rest will fall easy.
I totally agree. There's also this emotional feeling of like when you save, some people feel that like, oh man, but that's my hard-earned money, and like, how come I can't spend it now, and blah blah blah, and like that's a true feeling, and I understand it, but you have to shift your mindset to thinking that like it's still your money, like
Yeah.
you're saving that money for yourself, like it's still yours.
Yep.
It's just it's a tool to help you save, so that way you could do something bigger and better. If you just burn it all as it's coming, it's going to be very difficult to really grow and build wealth. And if you have a family, like you kind of want, I mean, I don't know about everyone else that might be watching, but for me, like it's important to be able to build something for my kids and my wife and all that kind of stuff. So it's just again, just view it as a tool, and it's a good way to shift your mind to really think like, hey, this is something for me in the future.
Agreed. And it's
Right.
it's all in how you want to look at it, and I completely agree. So if you're trying to leave something for your family, you can't do it by spending it all.
Right. You got to leave something behind, right? You got to leave something
Yep.
behind. People that are watching, like, please, if you have any comments or questions, or even like if you just want to input, or if we missed the mark, please like leave comments and let us know what your thoughts are. This is a community. This is a communication between people. It's not just like us preaching to y'all, but it's like we want it to be like free forum. So please chime in, see fit, and we would love to hear from you.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Yeah, feel free to comment and give us your feedback.
All right, bye, y'all. Have a good one.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan. Be sure to tune in next time.